welcome everybody. Pleased to have a spectacular panel here to talk about developments in the new cloud edge. We have Amir Khan, who's the founder, president, CEO of Alkira, an exciting new cloud networking company. Galil Zeno, founder and CEO of NetFoundry, a cloud native networking company, and Kevin Deerling, SVP of marketing with NVIDIA, of course, the giant chip and AI company that bought Kevin's company Mellanox recently. So it's a really high quality panel that's going to tell you a lot more than I can tell you, but I'm going to kick things off with some thoughts. I'm the chief analyst and founder of Futurum. We're an independent research company, and we really focus on innovations in cloud technology. As everybody knows, things are moving very quickly in the cloud, and we try to keep up to pace with all the changes. So let's start, shall we? And I'll move to the first slides. Of course, the topic is developments in the new cloud edge, SD-WAN, SASE, and 5G. And I'm going to talk about how all of these technologies are converging and how they're separate, yet they're all tied together at the same time. And what's really catalyzing all this right now, as we read the headlines in technology, everything is cloud, right? And unfortunately, we have this tenacious pandemic that's forcing us all into different habits. But of course, the technology impact of that is everything has become more virtualized. We're doing a lot more on Zoom. We're doing virtual meetings. We're working in home offices more often. And this has kind of triggered a cloud explosion, if you will. And you see that kind of just in the stock price of Zoom. Things are going a bit crazy. Now that means, of course, there's more demands on cloud technology. We need to connect things faster. We need to provide more bandwidth, and we need to keep pace with this new demand. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. Here's just some more facts about this cloud explosion. You know, cloud compute spending is growing about 4.5 times the rate of IT spending since 2009. We have 23% of IT workloads now in public clouds. That's up just since June, 19% in June. And Goldman expects this to reach 43% in 3 years. You're seeing these POPs explode all over the world. And of course, this is driven by the cloud explosion. It's really driven by APIs, software and infrastructure connecting to other software and infrastructure using more flexible cloud native APIs is what's driving everything. So I'll move to the next slide. So we put together a little taxonomy here so that you can understand when we throw all these kind of buzzwords around. You know, the topic of this is developments in the new cloud edge, SD-WAN, SASE, 5G. But what exactly does that mean? Well, we have kind of interesting groups of technologies that are evolving right now, and there's quite a bit of innovation in each of these areas. And I will say it all started with SD-WAN, a topic that I started following about 7 or 8 years ago when somebody, a very smart person, tipped me off, hey, Scott, you should follow this SD-WAN thing. And of course, Amir knows all about that. He founded Viptela, which was sold to Cisco. So he was there in the beginning. And the innovation around SD-WAN was really kind of virtualizing enterprise network connectivity at the edge. So how do you get all these branch offices connected more efficiently to a WAN without truck rolls and manual configuration of routers and all this. So it really provided an improvement in the management automation of the enterprise edge and the connection with the WAN. Now, as we move to SASE, you might have heard this word, SASE, Secure Access Services Edge, popularized by the research juggernaut Gartner last year. It's really about the integration of security and networking, taking these cloud security networks and orchestrating them with the cloud security services and orchestrating them with networks. And that is now starting to merge with SD-WAN. Of course, if you connect people at the edge of the network in the WAN, you also want to connect them with security. So we need to integrate the security services in the cloud with the WAN, and that's kind of what's happening with SASE. Then we move to Cloud Edge. Cloud Edge is really about pushing the cloud out closer to the end users. So we're all hearing about 5G, and I don't know about you, but I'm waiting to get the 5G connectivity in my neighborhood. It's not here yet, but it's coming. It's maybe a little more slowly than we wanted. But really, what 5G is going to do, it's also got providing services to enterprises, and there's a thing called private wireless. This can put 5G, in big box stores and warehouses. And what this is doing is pushing the cloud services closer to the end users. So we need to provide more compute. We need to provide more network, in these new locations. And this is require a lot of automation, a lot of scale. It's also going to create a lot more traffic. So the networks have to be able to support all this traffic. And that brings us to the next topic, which is multi-cloud networking. And really, this is as we drive all these services and this bandwidth into these multiple clouds, they need to be connected better. And this is going to spur a boom in multi-cloud networking, providing connectivity between different clouds. So that's kind of how we see all this playing out. Let's move on. I'm going to move to the next slide. And this is kind of a vision of how we build this new virtual network. If you think about the cloud as this big network in the middle that actually connects other clouds, whether that's Google or Azure, there's really a lot of stuff that happens in there. And it involves, routing and internet transit, service meshes, layer 2, layer 3 connectivity, but it's really all connected by APIs, right? Like you have all these clouds with gateways and these co-location points of presences, Equinox building data co-location facilities. All these networks, all these applications can be connected with APIs. And that's kind of what's driving the cloud revolution. It has driven it from the beginning. Cloud, you hear the term cloud native. Cloud native is about being able to easily connect things and drive things in the cloud, virtualized services using APIs. And you see the upper left here, we'll talk more about this, but this is really the new model for networking, is to give customers and enterprises the control over their networks and services with a web-based portal. So that's kind of how the new cloud network is going to be driven. And I'm going to move to the next slide. And when we ask people about this, because Futurium is end user based research, we're interviewing end users every day and surveying them once a month. We ask them what they need from cloud networking. They really need public cloud networking infrastructure to be connected better using cloud native networking and overlay technology and some of the stuff I just showed you. And we need to build cloud native networking technology that's more integrated among the different clouds. So those were the top two initiatives that people picked. To a lesser extent, they want to preserve their existing legacy infrastructure, but really they're more interested in moving toward this cloud integration. Next slide. So we'll talk a little bit here also about what is the cloud edge. So I showed you that network as a service model, which is let's call it the core of the cloud, getting two different clouds. But what happens is you go out closer to the customer, to these edge sites, roadside cell site, macro site, or you're in the basement of a stadium or a big box store. We're going to have these new cloud edges. And what this is compute and networking, as I said, pushed out closer to the customer, driven by 5G, the new application that's going to connect everybody a lot faster on the edge. And this is going to be really interesting because, as I said, if you look to the right, the cloud services, it's going to push a lot more bandwidth, across the network trying to connect these clouds. So 5G and the cloud edge just kind of adds to the multi-cloud challenge, right? And the need for networking. So let's go to the next slide. So as we talk to people and we gather this survey research, there are some key attributes of the cloud edge. You know, what folks tell us. It needs to be multi-domain. What does that mean? It means it needs to live in the telco world. It needs to live in the enterprise networking and IT world, and it needs to live in the cloud native world. But really, we need consistency between these models. As everybody knows, over time, these different domains have developed a different set of technologies that we're really starting to kind of coalesce around the cloud native technologies. And so that brings us to the next point, is we need cloud native networking. What is the top goal of network automation? We asked people this in August in our service provider survey about network automation, and they really want to use networks to accelerate their services, you know, be able to provision things on demand, accelerate the revenue, deploy services more quickly. Number one choice, 36%. They also want to simplify lifecycle management, the way the service lives on the network and how it's instantiated and changed. And then the next one is, of course, network security. So let's go on to the next slide. A little bit on SASE. Remember, I showed you those 4 buckets of technology. SASE's pretty hot, and you know, we have Galil's going to tell us a lot about SASE, but really it's secure access service edge. The driver is, as I said, integration of network and security at the edge in the enterprise networks, and the future is cloud-based. So taking cloud-based security services, pushing them out to the edge, making sure they're embedded in the network. Okay, and moving on to the next slide. So key attributes of SASE. You know, we have these global SD-WAN footprints being pushed out, these POPs. They're also going to embed security services. So the POPs can be used to deploy not only networking connectivity, but security services at the same time. That's going to enable distributed inspection and policy enforcement of all the traffic. It's all distributed with a cloud native architecture. And we're also moving towards identity driven security. What does that mean? It's not necessarily attached to your device or your IP address, but it's tracking the identity of either the user or the application or the machine and making decisions based on that, who can access what. Okay, so moving on. So when we asked, you know, why is SASE, you know, important? Why is it connected to SD-WAN? Why is it connected to networks? Well, because when you ask network users, and that's what this survey is, 100 network, you know, administrators and managers and architects, what is their biggest driver? It's better security. So security is the number one driver of new, you know, networking technology and new cloud automation. And the second is support for the cloud or edge services. We've talked about the cloud edge, so that's a big deal, and ease of use and management. The theme here really is flexibility. As network architects set up new networks, they need to be able to change them on the fly. They need to be able to manage them with software, and they need to be able to have a nimble network that can adapt to all these cloud applications. Moving on to the next slide. So we're going to discuss all these topics that I buzzed through real quick, and couldn't have a better group of experts to talk about this. So the first topic is my buckets of technology. I wonder if all of you agree with this and whether you see this convergence among the buckets. So let's go look at them again real quick. And I'm going to, I don't know if everybody's screen is the same. I'm going to start in the top left and move. This is like kind of Hollywood Squares or something. Start with Kevin and see, Kevin, if you agree with these buckets and you see, tell us what it means for NVIDIA, whether you see this convergence.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a good way to really classify the different aspects of networking, security, and cloud and multi-cloud. And as NVIDIA networking, we actually span all of these. So we support, typically we're inside of boxes and you don't always see us until you get to really the cloud edge. Then we start to become more visible with some of the 5G platforms that we have. But across all of these, I think security is critical. If you look at it, you've talked a lot about cloud networking and cloud native networking. I hope you talk some more about that. But really, cloud is not about implementation, but it's about experience. And so you talked about some of the underpinnings with overlay networks and things like that. From the consumer perspective, it's really about ease of use. And I want it to be the same way I always had it when it was in my enterprise data center that I managed, except I want it automated and really autonomous. And so what the implementation is that accomplishes that almost doesn't matter. So if there's an overlay network, who cares? What my experience is, I have a layer 2 LAN. And the fact that it's being spanned with EVPN across networks is really something that it's useful to understand, but really I don't need to know the expertise of that. We should be able to deliver that as a service so that whether you're at the edge, you're in a multi-cloud environment, whether you're connecting remotely through a secure connection with SD-WAN, whether it's software as a service, all of that is really hidden behind your user experience. The implementation shouldn't be important here. We should make it easy and autonomous.
That's great. So Galil, you're an expert in cloud native networking technology, and we were talking on the phone yesterday. You're telling me about this kind of convergence between SASE and SD-WAN. So do you agree what's happening here, and tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, Scott, thank you. I'll take this first from the perspective of our customers, from the perspective of businesses around the globe. You know, Scott, don't necessarily care about labels or taxonomy. They care about winning. And in today's world, they need to innovate, they need to be fast, they need to be agile, and obviously they need to do that in a cost-effective manner. What's interesting is that's led to incredible distribution, and you use that term quite a few times, Scott, in your presentation here and in your surveys, this massive distribution of applications. We like to say that the service provider edge, or the telco edge, or the cloud edge becomes less and less important, that the new edge is the application itself. And if I'm that business, I need to be able to securely and reliably connect that application, no matter where it is, on a device, on a near edge, on a far edge, on a cloud, on multiple clouds. So I think that's really the convergence we're looking at here, Scott. SASE, as you mentioned, is basically IT saying to us, I have a challenge. My apps are all over the place now. They're mobile, they're portable. From microservices in the cloud to my users who are all of a sudden all over the planet, work from home, et cetera. I've multiplied my number of branches by 50 or 100. That's incredibly difficult to manage. And so IT is looking at SASE and saying, okay, I can't have bespoke solutions. I can't have a one-off solution for remote work or VPN, a different one-off solution for cloud access, a different solution for WAN, a different solution for web security. I need a platform type approach. I need to manage the connections between my users and devices and my applications with one platform. Simple, agile, automated. From a customer perspective, Scott, that's what they're seeing. From a business perspective, that's how they're looking at this type of trend.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, good point. So it's interesting. Both you and Kevin are saying the end users don't really care about when us analysts come up with these fancy names for technology. They just want it to work, which I 100% agree with. But we do have to kind of explain what's going on. So I think it's a buzzword-driven world, unfortunately. Amir, what do you think? I mean, Galil's talking about the applications and supporting them, and of course, the network has to do that. and you're involved in doing that every day. So tell us what you're seeing on the network side and connecting multiple clouds.
Thanks, Scott. It's a pleasure to be talking to everyone today. So it's an interesting topic. We are talking about the network, and you have listed 4 major areas which are kind of trying to solve the same problem in different ways. So when we invented wide area networking, the SD-WAN stuff, it was a very simple goal to create a common fabric across multiple transports and seamlessly tie it into your existing infrastructure on-prem. And then some people started to bring it to the edge of the cloud to connect to multiple clouds. And then, of course, it's not cloud native, so you had to do manual stuff inside the clouds to tie things together. And then came the SASE world, where we are trying to bring the security services together with SD-WAN in some ways. And it's a very specific security solutions which are independently offered by security service providers, right? And you get to tie them on one-off basis into an existing environment, whether it's cloud or on-prem traditional way of doing things. And now we are starting to talk about 5G and cloud edge. And what is the cloud edge? And how many applications need that? Networking is inherently distributed technology. So could we just seamlessly extend that into areas which are relatively closer to the user? And could we do services or provide services in a common way so that we don't have to create a separate cloud edge from the cloud environments themselves? Then comes the multi-cloud world, where we have the big behemoths like AWS and Azure and GCP and many others coming up, and they interestingly are doing things in their own way in each one of these clouds. So even though we are able to access these clouds with APIs, but they are independently done for each one of these clouds. So that's where the problem is for the customer. They have tools like to automate things through APIs or through Terraform, but it's done differently for each one of the clouds and each one of the environments. So therein lies the problem. There is no common infrastructure across all these environments. And when we talk to our customers, they're in dire need to make sure things are simple, they stay up and running all the time, right? So requirements are simple from the customer perspective. As Galil said, people want to, and Kevin also said that people want to have the experience of utilizing the applications, which is seamless. And that experience is very important. So we have to take a step back as an industry and come up with a common infrastructure which allows people to achieve their goals. And thereby, what we are bringing to the table is the network cloud, which can span across multiple cloud environments. It can span seamlessly across your on-prem environments, and it allows you to bring together best-of-breed applications into that infrastructure, and it allows you to scale like a cloud, which we have never seen, in the networking environment. It's always been piecemeal approach in these all independent environments. So we need that for control, for security, for governance. We need an end-to-end infrastructure which seamlessly extends across all these environments and which is consumed as a service.
That's a great point. I like the idea of the network cloud because it does tie together the infrastructure we talked about from end to end, from the cloud edge all the way into the core cloud infrastructure. And you brought up some good points, Amir, about the cloud edge and 5G, which we're going to talk about in our third discussion topic. So I'll bring that back up. But first I want to ask, I talked about this cloud explosion. So I'm fascinated by kind of the real-time nature of the world we're in right now. And you guys talked a lot about your customers. Tell me, do you get like phone calls every day of people like, how do we deal with this? 40% of our workforce just went online. How do we scale? How do we change? How do we become more nimble? Is that the topic of discussion every day? Why don't we start with Galil?
Yes. It's unprecedented, Scott, right? You mentioned the global pandemic. What that meant for many businesses, if I had a 100-person branch office, well, now virtually overnight, I have 100 branch offices. And I don't just have 100 branch offices that look like my old branch office. They're essentially uncontrolled, right? They're people's homes. I don't control the bandwidth. I don't control the modem. I don't have near the amount of controls that I would have in a heavily engineered, heavily configured branch office type environment. So that new normal, that next normal, if you will, Scott, has dominated conversations. And on the other side of that, as you mentioned, okay, now my folks are in their home offices. I now have 100x the amount of branch offices overnight. And where are their applications? Oh, the applications are in the cloud, right? They're and increasing, multi-cloud. So when you look at that topology, Scott, and you say, okay, how do I securely connect someone in their house to some application in the cloud? Architecturally, the answer becomes pretty obvious, right? It becomes cloud native networking, right? I want to be able to take a direct flight, so to speak, from Scott using an application to whatever cloud that application happens to be in. And I need to do it as code, not configuration, right? As Amir said, I can't have one solution for Scott to access an app in GCP, different one in Azure, different one in AWS. Doesn't scale. So that new topology, Scott has completely revamped how our customers look at the design goals of simplicity, user experience, and security, and look at it now as a cloud native networking topology.
Excellent. Great point. So Kevin, at the beginning of this presentation, I put up the Zoom stock price, but I probably should have put up the NVIDIA stock price too, because I hear you guys are doing pretty well selling cloud powering chips. So tell us what you're seeing from demand and how people are adapting to this cloud explosion.
Yeah, so I think, the calls that we're getting from our customers are in fact video calls that they're zooming in with us and connecting over all sorts of, video and advanced cloud-based applications. And really what our customers are asking, because they are the service providers, whether it's a cloud service provider or a telco service provider, they're saying, how do we deal with this massive demand that we're seeing? So I have a certain number of servers that I built into my data center, and that is directly responsible for both my CapEx and my OpEx. That's my expense. And so what is the efficiency that I can get out of the infrastructure? And it turns out that there's a ton of things that change that equation dramatically. So if I can support 20 video calls on a typical server versus 2,000, obviously it rips right down to the bottom line of the service providers. So this whole notion of, the network and network acceleration, intelligent networking, and really accelerate and offload, those are the key things that our customers are interested in, so that their infrastructure allows them to scale. And this goes back to the cloud native architectures that is really about scalability and efficiency and flexibility. You can bring a traditional server to its knees just doing encryption, because all of this communication across the network needs to be encrypted. Whether that's IPsec or TLS, that will literally grind a giant x86 CPU to its knees. And so those are all things that need to be accelerated. Those are the kinds of conversations that we're having with our customers. Is here's the demand we're seeing in this new digital world. How do I address that in an efficient, scalable manner?
That's interesting. Yeah, we're moving a lot more bits, aren't we? So Amir, let me ask you real quickly. By the way, Amir's company announced something $54 million in funding yesterday. So congratulations on that. But I noticed it was a customer, right? Koch Industries. So
Yes.
Tell us what that customer why are they making this? They obviously see the advantage of this technology. What kind of demand are they seeing from cloud, and why are they looking for a new solution?
Sure. So Scott, as you may know, Coke is one of the largest private companies in the US, and they have many different types of businesses. And their needs from the data center and cloud side are enormous. They're probably one of the largest consumers of the cloud services. And they had gone through multiple phases of deployment. The first one was obviously sitting on the co-location facilities and physically connecting to the clouds, and by bringing high-speed connections from their data centers into those co-location facilities. And obviously that was by no means cloud native, or didn't provide the type of access which was needed to the cloud resources. It was just bringing them to the edge of the cloud. Then they went and did it themselves in the virtual environment by spinning up virtual instances for networking nodes and whatnot, and built their transport hub architecture, which was sitting at different locations across the US and across the globe. They have presence in 70 countries across the globe. So it was becoming very complicated very quickly, and they realized that they needed to they had to have a solution which was as a service, which provided common capabilities across all clouds and across their on-prem environments, and common way of doing things like deploying firewalls for all types of capabilities, like remote users working from home. Why should I have to secure them differently from how I secure my traffic from cloud to internet or on-prem to internet? And so they came to us in 2018. Our visions were totally aligned. And we started working very, very closely with them. And now they were instrumental in helping us refine our solution. And it is an enterprise class solution. They have deployed it. They continue to expand very quickly across the globe. And they started from very small deployment in a brownfield environment. And now they're planning to move all of their infrastructure into our network cloud offering. And it's the first of its type. It is the network cloud. And we hope many other people will follow that, and will create some competition in the industry and have really strong solutions, for the customers. And they shouldn't have to worry about dealing with things individually, as we have been doing over the last 30 years. We haven't reached the level of automation that customers like Kevin's company require, from those networking environments.
That's great. So you mentioned the term automation, which is perfect because that happens to be our next topic. So, and we didn't even plan that, right? Yeah. So let's, and you guys all have great feedback from the end market, which is like where I like to focus. What are the problems of these customers? So thank you for that. So let's go to the next slide and the next topic of discussion, if we will. I get the slides moving here. So is cloud network automation happening? So you guys all talked about, these customers are experiencing the surge in demand. It's not a manual world anymore. We can't just, depend on, some guy with a tool belt to show up and move a router, right? We have to be able to connect these things with software and change them on the fly. In some cases, have the machines change the machines, right? So let's talk about that. I'll start with Galil. I'll move like this way, the other way around this time. And Galil, why don't you talk about how cloud native networking can help us without automation? What are you seeing?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, Scott. Not only is it happening, it's absolutely necessary to get the security, agility, and cost efficiencies that businesses need. So in a sentence, we usually like to say code is replacing configuration. And as everyone on this panel knows, networking historically has been very configuration oriented. And that made sense. When the goal was stability and you were just nailing up a circuit between point A and point B and putting 2 expensive routers on either side and calling it a day. Okay, configuration, perfect. Now, like in the diagram you have there, Scott, where in reality, one application can actually span all those clouds, right? It can have microservices across multiple clouds. It can call third-party APIs in multiple clouds. And obviously on the far left, it could be accessed from a person anywhere on the planet, as well as devices increasingly like IoT. So that level of distribution and the need makes it so that automation is not just a nice to have, like not just a cost efficiency, but actually necessary. And actually, Scott, I kind of tie it way back to one of your poll questions that you articulated at the top, where you were asking folks about the drivers for some of these projects. And interestingly, revenue was the number one answer on that poll that you had conducted. Now that's a big change, right? Networking is not traditionally looked at as a revenue enabler. If anything, it was looked at as a cost center. And that's the magic here. When we can take networking, make it into an innovation enabler, take configuration, put it into code, make networking actually enable business outcomes, revenue, agility, productivity. Now networking is on a whole new planet, so to speak. Networking is now software, just like the rest of our business, and can then support those goals through this type of automation. So that's the sea change we're seeing, Scott, if you will.
That's a great point, and I think to your point on the revenue, there's a great example of that yesterday. Of course, Apple had their big event, which the entire world watches, and I was watching some of the analysis on Bloomberg afterwards, and somebody pointed out that we still don't have 5G really. They have all these 5G phones, but do you know anybody that's really using a 5G phone yet? And so to your revenue point, the network and the service providers realize this. The network is slowing down their capability to deliver new revenue. They have to speed up the deployment of these networks, and that's kind of their big problem right now, which is exactly, you talked about that survey. It was a survey of service providers. They recognize the problem. We just know it's not an easy problem to solve, right? If you have the entire global service provider infrastructure moving from this legacy, plug things in world to a software driven cloud native world, it's a difficult process, but they need to accelerate that process so they can get these new services into the hands of the customers. So I'll let Amir weigh in, and then Kevin. So Amir, what are your thoughts on that? Are you going to help service providers speed this up?
As a matter of fact, we talk to the end customers, and that's where the requirements come from. And in talking to the majority of the customers, whether it's Fortune 100 or Global 100 or mid-sized companies, there's a common theme, right? Especially in the bigger companies, there's a security team, there's a network team, and there's a cloud team. The cloud team always wants to move at the speed of the business. The networking and security teams are always lagging behind because they don't have enough automated tools in their tool set. So the question comes, do we stay where we have been as an industry to provide configuration tools or capabilities to program the environment, or we automate the environment to the extent that they can consume it as a service in a very simple manner? And that's where the debate is inside the customer base. And they all want to, the networking team is under so much pressure all the time because things are even moving faster as we move towards this digital age, right? And so that's where we bring our solution to the customers, and they really like it. It's very simple, straightforward to deploy large-scale environments across the globe without having to know the nitty-gritty details of each one of the clouds or how your on-prem environments work. You simply point and click your environment and click on provision, and your whole network across the globe comes up in less than an hour. So we have spent a lot of time in working closely with the customers and the service providers to refine our mechanisms to provide enough automation so that the customer's life becomes easier, and it's resonating extremely well.
Excellent. Thanks. Kevin, how do we get to the automation faster? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think one of the big challenges that the service providers are facing is they don't actually yet know what this technology is going to be used for. So I think the 5G capabilities that are coming and all of the new network services that are coming, the challenge is how am I going to use that? And really one of the things that we focus on at NVIDIA is to make it a software-defined answer. So it's software-defined and hardware-accelerated computing. So however you do that, everything as we move to this microservices architecture. So we take these giant monolithic software applications and we break them up into smaller pieces. So we can address security, we can address the data processing, we can address AI, we can address video codecs and improve video conference quality. So all of those things are just software now that are accelerated, and they're all built into microservices, and you can scale them independently. Because even over the course of a day, you're going to have massive changes in the workloads that are impacting the cloud. And so that's the real key, whether it's 5G with an aerial platform or Jarvis, or Clara, which is our healthcare platform. The real key is to make everything software defined and automated so that the service providers ultimately, when the applications start showing up, they will be able to address that in just software. So that's the real key to automation.
So that's a great segue. You mentioned 5G again, Kevin. So I'm going to, of course, go to the next hot topic. Let's move to the next discussion topic about Cloud Edge. And I mentioned this big Apple event. Just my personal view on 5G, and I'm waiting for it as a business application, not a consumer application, because it can. I live in a little bit of a rural community, and my DSL connection sucks, and I want my 5G. So we're all waiting for this 5G, and this Cloud Edge is going to bring a lot of new services and capabilities, whether that's on the enterprise side, more flexible broadband, whether it's a new low latency applications like VR, AR, autonomous driving, or whether it's just new, iPhone applications or consumer applications. It's going to bring these new things, but the Cloud Edge is a big place. So let's talk about what this Cloud Edge. I'm going to start with a question that one of you guys sent me earlier was to tell us what you think the new Cloud Edge applications are. One of them that's mentioned frequently these days in the analyst community is private wireless for enterprise, which is a little bit what I talked about. How do I use it for a private wireless connectivity? So I'll start with Kevin, since I know this is a pet topic of yours, Kevin. What are these new applications on the Cloud Edge? What are we going to see?
Yeah, I think, as I was saying, it's the market doesn't quite know yet. We have all these great new applications, lower latency and higher throughput. And clearly those are going to enable new applications. And that could be robotics. And instead of a robot that is sort of governed by a human being, these are going to be autonomous robots. And they're going to be working side by side with human beings. And now they need to make decisions in real time so that they don't ever hurt the human beings. We're going to go back to Asimov laws. That's the first law. Don't hurt human beings. And so for robots to actually make that possible, they need to be intelligent. And it's going to be running on an AI platform connected at the edge. Everything needs to be secure. Everything needs to be scalable. And whether that's in retail environments with recommendation engines, whether it's natural language processing, that you're going to be talking and communicating to an intelligent entity that is going to be autonomously communicating with you, all of that is going to be driven by high bandwidth, low latency, and really accelerated computing. And so that's where really we are focused in terms of enabling all of this And we want to do that on a single platform. We don't want you to have to build custom platforms for each of those different types of applications. It's just deploying software onto an accelerated computing platform, which is what we do.
Right, that's great. I'm going to see if I can bring up the slide of the, there we go. There it is. There's the cloud edge. So it's kind of what you're talking about. And I think you're right. And this is, again, if I could do the meta analysis of my job as an analyst, it's quite challenging, right? Because the brilliant marketers are always coming up with what's going to be really super hot, right? And then we have to analyze what we think actually will happen, and it's not always it's not always what you think, and so we have all these different areas that we're watching. We're watching autonomous vehicles. We're watching stadiums and private wireless in either consumer venues or commercial venues. Will you get your cool new app at Costco that tells you about the intelligently tells you about the new beer sale that's in row 5, you're in row 4, and sends you a coupon in real time, this kind of futuristic shopping application. There's all these new applications, but we're still waiting for them to show up, though I see some of them every day. So Galil, tell us, what your play in the cloud edge is going to be. And I know you guys have a big focus on security, what the security needs of cloud edge are going to be.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin in that we don't know specifically by definition where these kind of new apps that are going to take advantage of this environment are going to come from. Obviously, applications that need better latency, data-heavy applications where it just doesn't economically make sense to backhaul that data to the cloud. Those categories of applications, certainly. I think the interesting and the promising aspect with these new capabilities, and I'll compare it to Kevin's chips, right? If you look at the NVIDIA chips and Mellanox chips, what you can do on those GPUs, the AI you can do, the ML you can do, because you previously couldn't do that, well, you didn't build applications that needed that, right? You would have been building something that didn't work. Well, now all of a sudden people have a brand new paradigm, and it's the same thing here with 5G, private LTE, CBRS here in the US. A quick example, Scott, we have a partnership with Microsoft for Azure Stack Edge and private edge zones. The way that works, Scott, is whether I'm a retail store or whether, let's say, I'm a remote site like oil and gas, mining, pipeline, et cetera, and I need just to instantly kind of spin up a local, low latency, highly secure 5G network, I can order this Azure Stack Edge box from Microsoft. It will show up, I'll plug it in, I'll give it an internet connection, I'll give it hopefully some power and a proper cooling environment. And at that point, Scott, this slide becomes real. Like, I didn't build an entire network. I provided some power and internet, and now I have a private, let's say 5G or LTE network that can meet all my local needs. So let's take the video example. Let's say I'm doing a lot of analysis, video inferencing, ML on local video. Well, I don't want to do that in the cloud. I want to do that right on site. And now I can with this Stack Edge solution from Azure, from Microsoft. Now, when the data needs to go to the cloud, let's just say it's the metadata. Let's say it's some control plane data back to the Azure cloud. What we did with Microsoft is the NetFoundry Zero Trust Networking is built right into that box. So that coming out of the box to the rest of the world, you now have global, zero-touch, automated networking. So again, I always like to bring it back to an end customer perspective, Scott. No matter what those applications are going to be, let's just say it's video inferencing, let's say it's low latency applications, with these type of ecosystem integrations, I mentioned the one with Microsoft, there's many others, the end customer now has the pieces to be able to innovate, to be able to have the agility and automation they need, and importantly, to do it with a kind of platform as a service type approach. That's what's exciting to us here with these new set of capabilities.
Right. So I mean, not to bring up another buzzword, I mean, what you're talking about is the concept of infrastructure as code, right? Having the network being automatically programmed by the application.
That's it. In a kind of declarative manner, Amir mentioned it earlier. He was spot on. I, as IT, I don't want to do something different just because the cloud is different. That just needs to look like an endpoint, and I need the proper abstractions and controls code so that my endpoints can spin up in all those different clouds, and it just works. It just works, Scott, with security, zero trust in our case. It just works from a reliability perspective, and it just works from an automation perspective. When we talk about cloud native networking, that's where we're going, Scott.
That's great. So Amir, what is Cloud Edge going to mean for you guys? Like you're more kind of in the core of the network, but obviously this is pushing more bandwidth and applications into multiple clouds, right?
Yeah, so I'm a very simple-minded person. So let's dissect this diagram, right? And you're talking about autonomous cars. Majority of the decisions that the cars are making are on the road, staying in the lane, changing the lane, taking an exit, detecting a light. Do you really want to rely on the network to be able to make that decision and that latency, right? So you need that real time. So as an example, Tesla today detects the light, and if you don't start moving on the green light, it gives you a pointer that you're not moving, right? So those are detected through cameras and different types of radars, etc. Now, there are certain applications where you would require communication across multiple entities through the towers, but those are very few applications. Even if you have robots monitoring a facility, most likely they're going to have direct communications either over Bluetooth or other types of wireless mechanisms in the near vicinity. And then, the remote monitoring person is going to have to talk to the robot and take that some actions which may not be as real time. So what I'm trying to get to is that especially in the enterprise applications, the real-time scenarios where you need the nanosecond type decision making are very rare. You can get away with microsecond, millisecond type latencies. And as long as you're in single digit to maybe perhaps double digit millisecond latencies, majority of your applications are covered. So what I like to say is that cloud is the new edge, right? And cloud is a distributed entity, which can, if needed, span to the tower locations. And the solution that we are building, because it's independent of the underlying clouds, the infrastructure is built in the cloud and it's very portable to different environments. It scales to all these different types of applications. But again, the users are not coming to us yet with highly sensitive, in many verticals, highly sensitive latency-based applications. There are very few of those applications that exist out there today. Gaming, yes. If you're a gaming enthusiast, then absolutely you need something, low latency to work with each other. So that's our view.
Okay, that's a great point. So I'm going to do one more question. We want to get on to we have media questions coming up in a few minutes. So let's try to make this a quick one. We talked about SASE, and there's this term, Galil mentioned it a couple times, zero trust, which I hear increasingly. We were talking about applications like autonomous cars. You don't want people hacking into your car and driving it for you. So real quick, if we go quick definition, tell people what zero trust means. Kevin, what is zero trust?
Yeah, so I think it's an incredibly important concept related to the edge, because if you look at a traditional data center, cloud data center, first time I went to one of these, I was sort of blown away. I felt like I was entering Fort Knox because, there were gates, guards, and guns that provided the physical security to get into that. And once you got in there, you know, they really made a point of demonstrating all of these edge appliances, the perimeter firewalls and the connectivity points. But really, in an edge environment, everything is turned upside down. And, you know, I would have agreed with what Amir said even a few months ago before I became part of NVIDIA, that the 5G and the number of things that were going to be actually in cars and making autonomous decisions. What has happened since I've joined NVIDIA is I've really redefined what I think of as a cloud application. It's just a microcosm of the cloud. And what I've seen in terms of autonomous entities, that if you look at a smart city application or a retail application, people are going to walk up and plug cameras into this edge environment that isn't protected. And users are going to be able to have physical access to machines. And this is where you need a zero trust model. You trust nothing. You trust no entity, you trust no application, you trust no device. Everything needs to be authenticated. And once that happens, the peripheral security model is no longer sufficient. It's vital, but it's no longer sufficient. And what we're doing is with our data processing units, we're putting really a firewall into every server, into every device. It's software defined and hardware accelerated, but everything is authenticated. Every microservice, every application, every connection point is encrypted, authenticated. That's really the notion of, you know, zero trust model, is you're trusting nothing. Everything has to be verified, because ultimately you're getting rid of this physical and even logical security models that were sufficient in the past.
Mhm.
Great. Yep. I like the idea of keeping people out of my data center. Galil, zero trust. I know you guys do this. What does it mean for you?
It starts with identity. Scott, remember, most enterprise networks today, the way they do identity is by location. Like, are you in the branch office? Are you on my network? Well, as Kevin articulated, that's no good anymore. It used to be fine. Now my network includes billions of internet endpoints. Anybody can get in my network, despite the gates, guards, and guns. So location doesn't work for identity. Can't trust location. IP address, MAC address, forget about it. They can be ephemeral, they can be spoofed. You need an actual identity. So what we've done on the NetEvents side, for example, is when our software is on an endpoint, when it's in the cloud, when it's on a router, when it's in a modem, it contains an X509 certificate bi-directionally authenticated with a controller, a very, very secure identity. And we didn't make it up, Scott, right? I mean, most apps, take a banking app on your phone, most apps use the same kind of private key, public key cryptography to secure themselves. It works incredibly well, except it's incredibly difficult to do in the networking side, historically. So we've changed that. We've simplified that. We've built it right into the solution, so it's simple for IT to administer. They don't have to go build a PKI infrastructure, et cetera. It just works. They now have an identity. And then, as Kevin said, now that you have a trusted identity, now you can do authentication based on that identity, least privileged access. Like, Scott, just because you're Scott and I can verify that you're Scott, it doesn't mean I should give you access to an entire network, an entire subnet, an entire suite of applications, because what if somebody essentially takes control of your connection? Instead, least privileged access. What applications does Scott need right now at this point in time from what location he's in, depending on the real-time state and health of his identity, the device he's on, the network, et cetera. That least privileged access, again, very difficult to manage at scale when it's something like VLANs, hardware constructs, tunnels, forget about it. But now that you can manage that from the cloud, with cloud native networking, with cloud orchestration, now IT gets the centralized visibility, the centralized control to be able to enforce that least privileged access in a simple way. So zero trust, to try to summarize that quickly, Scott, right? Zero trust says, I don't trust any of that, right? Obviously, I need to trust something, so let me trust a secure identity, and let me give that identity in an agile, easy to manage way. Let me give it only access to what it needs access to.
Okay, that's a great definition. Thanks, Khalil. And I know NetFoundry is a leader in zero trust, and we see a lot of identity security discussion coming down the line. It's going to be a big topic, I think, in 2021. Amir, how do you do zero trust on your cloud network? How does the cloud network become zero trust?
Yes, I think these are all very important points that Kevin and Galil bring up. And as I said earlier, there's certain functionality which is needed on the end node. There's certain functionality which is needed in the cloud. And of course, identity is very, very important. Even when we did SD-WAN at Viptela, we came up with the secure way to secure all the networking nodes, right, based on how applications are deployed. So the key distribution at routing scale was one of the innovations that we did at that time. So we fundamentally believe in securing everything in the infrastructure, no matter where it is, whether it's the end host or nodes in the network or nodes residing in the cloud. Everything needs to be secure. And security needs to be distributed also. I think Kevin alluded to that. There are certain pieces of the security that needs to reside in the end nodes, like these autonomous vehicles and whatnot. And there are certain functionality which is needed in the cloud so that you can have multiple layers of security to secure the overall infrastructure. Now, every node is becoming attack point, right? And so you need to make sure going forward that we have a very secure environment. And that only can be achieved if you have commonality. If you have too many ways of doing things across different environments, then it's very easy to create holes in those environments. So our belief is that make it simple, make it ubiquitous, provide common services across all environments, one way of doing things rather than 100 different ways of doing things.
Okay, great. That's a great summary. Thanks to all of you. Really, really good input. And I think one of my takeaways is just how complex all these things are. And you guys are really working hard to make it easier for people to connect all these cloud applications and networking. And there's going to be a lot of stuff going on in the next couple of years.